My wife Mandy drove just over 8,000 miles a year, mostly on short business trips to clients. Our detached villa in Surrey was not that far from the hellish M25 freeway that tightens the loop around London. It was a great place to live, but even a short commute to work can take a long time on the M25. To cope with the traffic on the M25, Mandy preferred to snack and drink soft drinks while listening to bubblegum radio. It helped that she adored her bright orange VW Beetle Cabriolet. It was a brand new version of Volkswagen with a powerful 2-liter engine, state-of-the-art sound system, black soft top, and black leather seats. Many agree that it's a great little car, but that didn't stop her from cluttering up the interior with candy wrappers, empty drink cartons, and other nonsense. It amused me that she drove a car with a top speed of over 120 miles per hour, but most of the time it was either stationary or crawling along some of the busiest roads in the UK. Mandy's first car was an old VW Beetle when she was at university, and she told me she has fond memories of that car. This was before she met me, and in those days she lived at home with her parents. I didn't ask her, but it's likely that her fond memories involve spending time with young people in tight spaces. When VW reinvented the Beetle a few years ago, she kept talking about how much she would love to have such a car. I took the hint and bought the top-of-the-line convertible she wanted for her 50th birthday. I also bought the personalized registration she was supposed to have. It cost an absurd amount of money for a license plate with her initials and the letters Bug. The car became known as Bug, but despite her affection for it, Mandy couldn't be bothered to check the tire pressure and fluid levels in the Bug, so that was something I did regularly. Some people don't mind driving around in a car full of junk, but I can't stand dirty cars, so I also cleaned up empty cardboard boxes, paper cups, food wrappers, and other trash. It was no big deal, and I never mentioned it. Mandy never thanked me, probably because she didn't even notice, but I didn't mind because at the end of the day I always found enough change amongst the trash to buy a couple of beers at our local pub. It's not surprising that Mandy was a bit careless with her change, considering we both earned well and lived in affluence. Mandy is a business consultant. She helps a wide variety of companies develop strategies to develop and grow their businesses. I'm a freelance project manager specializing in change management projects. Everyone calls me Terry. My real name is Dave, not Terrence, but even my wife calls me Terry. Why? It's short for Terminator. Change projects almost always get the poor bastards fired, and it's my job to do the dirty work. Mandy and I met at university when we were both studying business administration. We became such good friends that we started our own limited company, Alpha Business Consultants Limited, before we were even married. Although we were young and relatively naive, we received some useful advice and financial support from my father, a respected commercial lawyer. Sadly, my father is no longer with us, having died of illness a couple of years ago. When we set up the company, he agreed to become a director, and it was his active involvement that gave us the seriousness we needed to work with potential clients. In return, we gave my father some shares in the company, and he was always ready and willing to use his skills, knowledge, and experience. In the early years, Mandy and I worked hard to generate business for ABC, building up a base of clients who needed strategic business planning advice. After a while, however, we realized that our skill sets were quite different. Mandy is skilled at helping companies plan for the future, while my forte is operational problem-solving in the here and now. Her specialty is planning for what people want to see, while mine is solving problems when things go wrong. Both Mandy and Dad felt that ABC should be clearly defined as a strategy-focused company rather than an implementation-focused one, so we agreed that I would work separately as an independent consultant specializing in organizational change project management. Mandy continued to work at ABC as a sole employee. Our twin daughters, Linda and Lucy, left home a couple of years ago and are now at university, but when they were small, I set aside a room on the first floor of our house as the ABC office and hung an office sign on the door. Mandy or I could go in there and work undisturbed. Gradually, it became Mandy's office because I work mostly on client premises and she works from home. She has about 50 key clients, and she charges for her consulting services because those clients need her advice. Unlike Mandy, I was rarely in business full-time, although I received referrals and regularly moonlighted as an associate at a well-known consulting firm. I usually had only one client at any given time, with whom I worked for weeks or months managing a major change project such as an office move or organizational restructuring. Having completed the project, I would usually take a break for a few days or even weeks before a new assignment came along. Not knowing what comes next can be frustrating for many, but I got used to it and enjoyed the occasional break, catching up on reading and improving my cooking skills. It also gave me time to do most of the chores around the house that didn't require professionals. I also cleaned the aquarium in Mandy's study on a regular basis. She had read somewhere that a large aquarium with lots of brightly colored tropical fish helps the thought process, so she just had to get one. She liked the aquarium, but she couldn't be bothered to maintain and keep it. She probably thought pH was just two random letters, so I ended up looking after the well-being of the fish. I never complained about loneliness when Mandy went away on short business trips, and she didn't complain if I was gone for a week working at a facility in another part of the country. In fact, I think our loving relationship only benefited from these infrequent absences, especially after our two daughters left home and we were left alone. My hope was that by becoming empty nesters, we could revitalize our social lives by going out more often, maybe even taking a romantic weekend trip to Paris or Rome. As the saying goes, men plan and the gods laugh. That all changed when Mandy came home one day with Wee Doug. Wee Doug is a Shih Tzu, also known as a Chinese lion dog. Every time I see him, I am reminded of an anecdote about a guy who went to a zoo where there was only one animal, a dog. It was a Shih Tzu. I was a little annoyed that Mandy got a dog without consulting me. Wee Doug was friendly enough, but I realized right away that eventually I would have to take him for walks and keep an eye on him when Mandy wasn't around and possibly when she was. When she got him, he was still a puppy and needed to be house-trained, so guess who got that treat? We started calling him Wee Doug, not just because he was little. For a while, he peed everywhere and anywhere. Mandy adored Wee Doug. He was literally her lap dog, sitting on her lap every chance he got. She petted him as he lay next to her on the couch while she watched TV. He sat in the chair next to her when we sat down at the dinner table, and in the morning he could invariably be found lying on our bed. I tried my best to persuade Mandy not to give Wee Doug complete freedom of movement around the house, but my entreaties went unheeded. To keep our love life from going off the rails, I had to lock the bedroom door if I wanted my wife alone in it. And even then, I had to remember to unlock the door and open it afterward, or else Wee Doug would start whining at me from behind the door and Mandy would stay in the bedroom. Now you're probably thinking I'm an irritable bastard and probably suffering from OCD digging through the trash in my wife's car, but I'm not. I'm not too bothered by the little things, so when I needed to clean up the wee bug, I'd open the car door, shake out all the trash, and dump it in a plastic bag on the edge of the door frame. Any little thing ended up on the floor under the trash, so no sorting was necessary. This Sunday afternoon was no different until a piece of paper fell on the floor next to the plastic bag. I noticed it was a credit card receipt from the Ainsley House Hotel, a huge country house hotel about 20 miles from our house. Like many large country house hotels, it has a restaurant with a solid reputation, but the main income comes from the spa and conference center, where seminars, wedding receptions, business dinners, and other events are held. There were no details about the purchase, but the amount was what one might pay for a lunch or dinner for 2 or 3 people. I assumed Mandy was treating customers, so I figured it was best not to throw the receipt away in case she needed it, and slipped it into my wallet to give to her later. I put all the snack wrappers and other trash in a plastic bag, tied it up and tossed it in the trash, then drove the wee bug to a local garage to fill it up and check the tires and fluid levels. Mandy was leaving the next day for a business trip up north and wouldn't be back until a few days later. I, on the other hand, had a lot of free time. I had hoped to take her to lunch at the Fox and Hounds pub, but she said she was too busy preparing for the trip. I was disappointed by this because Sunday has always been a family day for us. Our daughters continued that tradition by calling each other on Sundays, so I wasn't surprised when, upon returning from the garage, I found Mandy with her feet up in the living room, clearly engaged in a long phone conversation with Lucy. Listening to Mandy finish the conversation, I realized that Lucy was having another crisis in her personal life. Linda is the calm and poised daughter, whereas Lucy is the drama queen. When their sleepovers with the boys got serious, I tried to stay calm, but also show that I care about what's going on in their lives. They know we are both there for them if they need help or advice, but their mom is usually first on the list if they want to gossip or scandalize. As I recall, Mandy told Lucy to get over it. to get back in the water, that there are still plenty of fish in the sea, and that she should try before she buys. I didn't know what had happened, and I didn't know what advice to give Lucy. I think the Latin motto, festina lente, is generally a good approach to problem solving. Don't rush things. Give yourself time to think and then decide what to do. Whatever happened, Lucy had to decide for herself what she wanted to do next. I wasn't going to do my part and confuse her further, so I just asked Mandy to say hi to me and went into the kitchen to prepare Sunday lunch. Roast beef and Yorkshire puddings with roast potatoes was our standard Sunday meal, and I found therapeutic pleasure in cooking it all, especially when I had a decent bottle of claret to go with it. Mandy wasn't much for dinner conversation, although she did bring me up to speed by telling me about her phone conversations with Linda and Lucy. Linda was in a steady relationship with a nice guy and was going through a blossoming period in her studies, getting good grades on her latest assignments. Lucy was not doing so well, and her boyfriend dumped her after he noticed her making out with another guy. I figured that Lucy's boyfriend could accept her making out with another guy if he was given time to change his mind, but I doubted that any way back could be found if Lucy decided to try possible replacements in the meantime. Mandy had a very different viewpoint and seemed to think that Lucy should just forget about the relationship and look for fun elsewhere. After dinner, I went for an evening promenade with wee Doug, making sure the small black plastic bag containing his belongings was tightly closed and tossed into the trash can outside. I just don't understand the idiots who hang these little bags on bushes and trees. Do they seriously think the dog shit fairies are going to fly in the middle of the night and pick up their leftovers? Later, I sat in the living room watching TV while Mandy retired to her office with wee Doug to finish preparing a presentation for a client. I loaded the dishwasher and headed to bed, where I tossed and turned for a while before falling into a restless sleep. I vaguely sensed that Mandy had gone to bed much later, but when I woke up in the morning, she was already up. Instead of my beloved wife, I found myself face to face with wee Doug, who was exhaling his stinky dog breath right in my face. There's nothing like morning Shih Tzu breath to instantly get you out of bed. I quickly got dressed and took Doug out for his morning hygiene, and then joined Mandy in the kitchen. We're both not big fans of mornings, and Mandy always needed a couple cups of espresso to start the day. We chatted a bit about the weather while we waited for the rush hour traffic to finish its stop-start on the M25 freeway. Then she kissed me on the cheek, stroked wee Doug affectionately, got into wee Bug, and set off. It was only as she drove away that I remembered the check in my wallet and decided to leave it on the desk in her office. That's when I noticed that the payment on the check was stamped for 10:18 a.m. It was most likely a payment for an overnight stay, but that didn't make sense. Perhaps she had some business event and didn't want to drive home. I could have asked her later, and there might have been some simple explanation. But I had some free time on my hands, so I decided to check my day planner to see where I was that day. It turned out that I hadn't been home that week, but I had noted in my day planner that Mandy had to go up north for 3 nights. The receipt was issued the morning after she left, so it looked like she only had time to drive 20 miles before spending the night at the Ainsley House Hotel. If she was at a business event, I could easily drop her off and pick her up, and she wouldn't have to pay for an overnight stay. I sat in her office and looked at the receipt. I hadn't noticed anything unusual in her behavior. We still made love regularly, but I couldn't escape the thought that this could be proof that she was having an affair. I was shocked by this possibility, but more than anything, I was puzzled. I had absolutely no idea that she could be in a close relationship with someone else, and I had no suspicions whatsoever. I also had a hard time understanding why she would book a hotel room when she could just take advantage of my constant absences and have fun at home. Of course, maybe she was doing both. Or maybe there was some completely innocent reason why she was staying at the Ainsley House Hotel that evening. As I sat there trying to figure out what was going on, it dawned on me that she could be doing the same thing on her current business trip. I grabbed my cell phone and dialed the number on the receipt, hoping my suspicions were unfounded. I asked the pleasant woman who picked up the phone if she could put me through to their guest, Mrs. Amanda Carmichael. She said she was sorry she couldn't do that. For a brief moment I was relieved, but instead of saying there was no reservation for that name, she explained that Mrs. Carmichael hadn't checked in yet. Registration starts at 12 noon, and it was only 11:30. Could I leave a message? She asked. Sure, I could leave a message something along the lines of, "Your husband called. He wants to know what the hell you're doing here." That would have been nice, but I wasn't likely to get the answers I wanted, so I politely declined her offer. I made myself another cup of coffee and considered my next steps. Unlike the nitwits at the helm of our country, I wasn't going to waste time dismissing the problem or coming up with my own version of reality. Maybe going to the hotel and confronting Mandy wouldn't solve our problems, but at least I could take immediate action, whatever the consequences. Maybe there was a plausible and completely innocent explanation. On the other hand, maybe she had a bull and was pointing her horns at me. I decided I would have to take the bull by the horns. I put Wee Doug in the garden, figuring I could clean up after him when I got back, then got in the car and headed for the Ainsley House Hotel. It was past noon when I got there, and I immediately spotted Wee Doug in the parking lot, so Mandy had probably already checked in. I parked across 4 rows and called Mandy's cell phone. She answered almost immediately. "Hey Terry, how's it going? I just heard there was a serious accident on the highway and I wanted to see if you were okay." "Well, traffic's a bit backed up, but I didn't know there'd been an accident. It's on the M25 highway, so you may have managed to get past it before it all happened." "Oh yeah, I'm just passing Watford. Thanks for checking." "Okay, let me know when you get there safely." "Okay, bye." After listening to this nonsense, I decided to walk around the hotel and see if I could surprise her. Maybe she's having lunch with her lover, and after lunch they'll go out for some fun. If she's not seen in the public areas of the hotel, I'll call her room and ask if I can go up to chat with her. I entered the hotel and headed for the Brasserie restaurant. It wasn't crowded, and Mandy was nowhere to be seen. I decided the lobby bar would be a good vantage point. I'd sit for a while and see if she and whoever she was dating showed up before calling her room. I still doubted there was even the slightest chance she was there for some other reason and just hadn't bothered to tell me what she was up to. As I crossed the lobby, I noticed a large bulletin board listing the various function rooms and activities for the day. Monday turned out to be a quiet day. The only event that caught my eye was a private party in the spa and fitness center that was scheduled to begin at 7 p.m. I wondered what kind of private party might be going on at the spa or fitness center. Perhaps it was people who wanted to take advantage of the services without being encumbered by clothing. I asked the front desk about the private party. The receptionist seemed a bit puzzled by my question and then politely said she could not provide any information about a private party. In other words, it was none of my business. I settled down at the lobby bar and ordered a coffee. The waiter serving me was much more candid when I asked him what the story was about the nudists at the spa. "Yeah, I guess you could call them nudists, but that's not all," he told me. "It's probably one of the worst-kept secrets, but this private party is a regular event." "Wow, that sounds fun," I said with false enthusiasm. "Any idea how I can find out more?" "Easy. If you have access to the internet, just type the name of the club in there," she said. I sipped my coffee, pulled out my cell phone, and went online via the hotel's Wi-Fi. Finding the club online proved to be a breeze. If you wanted to attend any of their events, you had to join the club and accept their terms and conditions, but the annual membership fee was only $20. The Mellow Monday Mix and Pick Party, which cost $49 for single men, was held at 7 p.m. the same day in the spa of a local hotel. The website specified how participants should be dressed, including the advice that masks were optional. By this time, I was pretty sure that Mellow Monday Mix and Pick was the reason Mandy had checked into the hotel. It looked like she wanted to have some fun this evening, so I decided to try and catch her in the act. I didn't want to see anything, but I needed clear evidence to use in the divorce if that's what she was up to. My plan wouldn't work if she caught me sitting in the hotel lobby, so I finished my coffee and went outside to get in my car. I pulled out my cell phone, called the club, and spoke to another nice woman who processed my payment and explained that I would need to bring ID to be allowed into the event. She told me that my personal information would not be shared with any third parties, including other club members. The name of the club would not appear on any transaction records. The name of the supplier for any purchases would appear as SJB Services. I headed home to do some homework and check that everything was okay with Wee Doug. I still wasn't sure I had bet on the right horse until I checked our finances online, including ABC bank accounts. Unfortunately, my horse looked like a winner. Over the past year, SJB Services had received recurring payments, presumably from Mandy's membership and various events she had attended. I printed out the bank statements. Back at the hotel that evening, I waited until 8 p.m. and went to the spa. Sitting at a large desk in the spa's reception area was a middle-aged woman in a flowery dress. It turned out to be the same woman I had spoken to on the phone. She checked my ID and sold me a mask. I apparently looked a little nervous and she tried to calm me down. Just make your way to the gym. You're a little late, so you may have to wait to join, but I'm sure you'll have a good time. Our members are very sociable and they will make you feel welcome. If you're in doubt about anything, ask and you'll be sure to be corrected. I put on my mask and walked through the door, down the aisle, past the locker rooms and into the gym. There were about 70 or 80 people in the gym, and the organizers had tried to create a warm and welcoming atmosphere. The heating was on, the lights dimmed. There was some pleasant jazz playing through the sound system, loud enough for background music to set the mood, but not interfere with conversation. There was a table of snacks just outside the gym door, but the action was elsewhere. Walking into one of the rooms, I found my wife and the way she was doing it. I wasn't going to speak or say anything that would give away my presence, so there was no chance of her becoming aware of my presence since there were still many people around. I concentrated on secretly recording what was happening on the video camera of my cell phone, which I slipped from my jacket cuff into the palm of my right hand. I'd signed a non-disclosure agreement, but that wouldn't stop me from getting evidence. Mandy's face would be clearly visible, and I could insert third-party faces into the video later. Standing next to me was a middle-aged white man dressed in a black shirt and black chinos. He was happily giving some sort of commentary on the match. I have no idea if it was intended for anyone else, but it seemed like everyone had something to share. Part of my mind was screaming in fear, but I shut it down in a dark corner. The other part of my mind was clear and focused and working on getting evidence. The girl at the front desk of the spa was surprised that I was leaving so soon after coming in, but I told her I had forgotten something and would be back. To say I was upset is an understatement. I was trying to come to terms with the fact that Mandy was having fun with a bunch of strangers. She was giving them something that was very dear to me. Our special relationship was completely devalued and, as a result, worthless. I was in shock, but as I walked out of the hotel, I began to have a physical and mental reaction to what I had just seen and heard. Nausea and a feeling of emptiness engulfed my stomach, and I could taste the bile that had collected in my mouth, almost like food poisoning. At the same time, I experienced an overpowering feeling of sadness, so deep that I had to sit in the car for a while before I could drive home. Slowly, my mind began to build a barrier around the resentment, sadness, and grief. It didn't make me feel better, simply because I knew all about the process of managing change in adverse circumstances. I wasn't going to waste time in denial. She was having fun with other people. After all, I had seen it with my own eyes. Sure, I was angry, but I accepted the inevitability of change and had to react to it, make adjustments, and control the change process as much as I could. Grief and anger would be my close companions for some time to come, but I decided that I would begin to act without delay. I wanted to get ahead of things, not get stuck in a rut trying to figure out what and why. By the time I got home, I had an idea of how to start taking action, controlling the inevitable changes and getting the results I wanted, not the ones forced upon me. I waited and saw if I would feel the same way in the morning. In the meantime, I took a little walk with Wee Doug so he could mind his own business and then tried to drown out the heartache with a couple of mugs of Glenfarclas. Next chapter. I didn't sleep well and felt like shit the next morning, but Wee Doug and I were going on a trip. I'd always thought of Cornwall as the English Cape. It's as far southwest as you can get and juts out into the open Atlantic Ocean. Now, most of Cornwall is practically a retirement home for wealthy retirees from London who have bought up all the little cottages that were once the homes of Cornish fishermen. The hard-working fishermen have been replaced by the silver-haired and wrinkled Mr. and Mrs. Beege. Many of these elderly people have pet dogs to keep them company and give them an extra incentive to keep healthy by going out for a walk each day. I thought about taking Wee Doug with me to Belgium, but he didn't have an electronic chip or pet passport, so that option fell away. Maybe it was a good thing he didn't have a chip because he could have been tracked. In any case, Cornwall was further away from Surrey than Brussels. The trip to Newquay took over 5 hours with some stops along the way so my Doug could stretch his paws and dump the load I had collected and discarded. The lovely woman at the animal shelter happily accepted him when I told her I had found him wandering the streets of Newquay without a collar or any other sign of who his owner might be. She immediately recognized Wee Doug as a Shih Tzu, and I tried to tell her my zoo joke, but she didn't get it. She assured me that the dog would easily find a home, even if his owners could not be found, because he was just the kind of small dog that older people are looking for. For my part, I was glad Wee Dog didn't whine when I left. He just looked a little puzzled. On the way out of Newquay, I decided to find a country pub for a late lunch. When I asked the man behind the cash register at the gas station where to have lunch, he told me, "You could do worse than white whores." I must have stared at him in amazement for a few seconds until I realized what he meant. Not far away was the White Horse Inn. Soon I was sitting at a table in a quiet corner of the beer garden, all by myself, with a plowman's lunch and half a pint of tasty ale. I checked my cell phone for messages and then called Jim Savage. Jim is a senior partner in a large consulting firm based in Surrey. Mandy and I have known Jim for a long time because he is a major competitor of ABC. Jim is a pleasant enough person, but in business matters he is a bit like a wolf in sheep's clothing. Shortly after Mandy and I founded ABC, Jim tried everything he could to neutralize us. He offered us well-paying jobs if we would close ABC and move in with him. There can be little doubt that Jim would have hired us, but would have gotten rid of us a little later when it was to his advantage. We didn't take Jim up on his offer all those years ago, but we met him from time to time at various business events hosted by the local Chamber of Commerce. Jim was very interested in what I had to say. Despite the short notice, he agreed to meet with me the next day. By the time I got back to Surrey, it was early evening and I decided to call Mandy and tell her about Wee Doug. I was still very angry, but at least I could take some action to take that anger away. I was sure I could talk to her without telling her what was on my mind. Coincidentally, my cell phone rang before I could call her. "Hi, Mandy," I said. "I was just about to call you. I'm afraid I have some very bad news. My Doug somehow got out of the garden this afternoon. He ran out onto the main road and got hit by one of those damn juggernauts." "Oh my God," she exclaimed in horror. "What happened? Is he all right?" "I'm sorry, Mandy. I'm afraid he's gone. I didn't see it myself, but a passerby came in behind me. She said she saw a dog skip under our garden gate and run down the street, but she couldn't stop it. The driver of the truck didn't stop. Perhaps he didn't realize he had hit a small dog. There was nothing I could do. I buried him in the backyard." On the other end of the wire, Mandy let out a long sob and then mumbled something about her poor Wee Doug. I couldn't blame Wee Doug for Mandy choosing to have fun with other people. Besides, I had a much greater satisfaction knowing that Wee Doug was alive and well and living in Cornwall, whereas Mandy thought he was dead and buried. I expressed my condolences to Mandy and offered to make a small headstone on Doug's grave. This brought her to tears again and we stopped talking. She was clearly heartbroken, and there was no doubt that she would cry for a long time that evening, mourning her loss. Next chapter. The next morning I went to the local butcher's shop and bought a rabbit, which I carefully butchered with a hammer and then buried, wrapped in an old towel in the garden. Just in case Mandy ever decided to dig up the corpse of her pet, I thought a broken, decomposing dead rabbit might make a good stunt double for a broken, decomposing dead Shih Tzu. I even put Wee Doug's collar on the rabbit, but kept his ID tag as a keepsake for Mandy so she would have a daily reminder of her loss. In the afternoon, my meeting with Jim Savage went very well. After I explained what I needed, he said he was almost certain that his company would agree to the deal I proposed and had his corporate lawyer draw up an agreement for me to review as soon as possible. On the way home, I stopped by one of the real estate agents in our neighborhood and chatted with him about how much they thought our house might be worth on the market. It seemed like a heck of a lot of money to me. Mandy and I discussed what we would do when we retired, and our plan of action included keeping the house and renting it out. We discussed this with our daughters, and they decided it was a good idea, as long as we didn't sell the house. Now I had a few changes to make to the plan. I didn't call Mandy that evening, even though she was probably waiting for me to find out how she was coping with the loss of Wee Doug. I thought about it, but I wasn't going to sympathize. She would deal with it on her own and come home late the next day. If her words are to be believed, she was somewhere near Manchester, but who knows if that's really the case. Whatever she was up to and wherever she was, I only know one thing. I slept a little better that night, having gotten a little payback for the grief she had caused me. Waking up early, I briefly wondered where Wee Doug was, but then I remembered that he was no longer with us. I was relieved to realize that I would no longer have to feed and water him, take him out for walks, and bag his shit. That fleeting thought was immediately replaced by the realization that I had much bigger shit to deal with. In England, divorce lawyers are called family lawyers. They specialize in family law, which, as far as I can tell, is mostly about divorce and death. There are many of them, and there is not much difference between them. I didn't want someone local, so I called and made an appointment with a family lawyer in Dorking. The name of the town suited my twisted sense of humor, plus it wasn't far away. I was given an appointment for the afternoon. With time to spare, I checked information about personalized registration plates on the Driver and Vehicle Licensing Office website, then visited a jewelry store and went grocery shopping before heading to Dorking. In between, I called a few business associates. When I got to the family law firm's office, my nerves were on edge. I had never expected to be in this situation. The receptionist tried her best to calm me down and brought me a cup of coffee while I waited. The lawyer turned out to be another middle-aged woman who listened attentively to my tale of woe, but warned me to take my time. In my experience, attorneys are stingy people and rarely turn down potential clients, regardless of the circumstances of a particular case. I pointed out to the lawyer that the divorce petition could be withdrawn at a later stage. Of course, from my perspective, this was unlikely and the attorney probably didn't care. But she seemed satisfied that we had discussed the options and agreed to file for divorce on the grounds of Mandy's infidelity. When I got home, I felt the need to pee, so I went into Mandy's office and peed in her fish tank. I wasn't sure how all that urine would affect her tropical fish, but I figured it would probably be deadly. Dissolving in water, urea turns into uric acid and breaks down into ammonia, which eat away at the mucous membranes of the fish's gills and scales, resulting in suffocation. The fish would likely live to see the evening when she returned home, but I didn't care. I didn't want to kill her dog, but I didn't care enough to kill a fancy-colored fish. It seemed odd, especially since I had spent so much time cleaning the tank and feeding the fish so far. I was killing the fish, and it was disgusting and gross. But it was another small act of revenge and another household burden lifted off my shoulders. I felt a little sorry for the fish, but I didn't feel sorry for Mandy. She would soon have other things to worry about. When Mandy got home in the evening, she hadn't eaten anything. It didn't help that I decided to make a very spicy beef vindaloo curry. It was one of my favorite recipes, but she couldn't stand it. That was fine with me, plus it gave me an excuse to drink some of that Scottish craft beer I love so much. Over dinner, I told her about the new contract I'd managed to negotiate while she was away. I explained that I'd be working up north in Yorkshire for a while, and I guess she figured it would just be another project like all the others I'd worked on over the years. She was still very sad for wee Doug and was disappointed when she found out that I was leaving for Yorkshire the next morning and wouldn't be back until late Saturday night. I didn't want to seem completely heartless, so after dinner I put my arm around her and we sat and watched TV. She was quietly crying for wee Doug, and I was quietly breathing beer and curry fumes on her. When we went to bed, I didn't fail to let out a mind-blowing fart in her direction that must have been heard 2 streets away and lingered like a decomposing badger in a township that had been ravaged by ferrets many months before. Mandy was disgusted, which was fine with me. I hadn't fed the fish for a while, and they didn't look too good when I checked them on Friday morning before leaving for Yorkshire. The urine had left them in a deplorable state, and it looked like they were going to have to go to heaven soon. Mandy was still in bed, so she had no idea that tragedy was about to strike again. My trip to Yorkshire had proved very fruitful. The deal had already been done over the phone, and the client had all the paperwork ready to sign. I knew several of the directors, and they were absolutely delighted that I had agreed to an initial 6-month assignment with the prospect of going permanent. In addition to my fee, they agreed to cover my moving expenses, temporary accommodation in a local hotel for 2 weeks, and half the cost of renting my property in Yorkshire for the remainder of the term. Everything was ready for me to start work more or less immediately. Now all I had to do was consciously disengage myself from Mandy. My cell phone rang just after I checked into the hotel that evening. I was really looking forward to a pint or two of locally produced Yorkshire ale, and I didn't want to waste time on the phone with Mandy. Of course, I expected there would be a price to pay for killing fish. As it turned out, the price was small. Mandy had discovered the lifeless floating fish earlier in the afternoon and tried her best to break the news to me delicately. She was completely unaware that she was speaking personally to the fish killer. "I'm sorry to have to give you bad news, especially after you had to get rid of wee Doug," she said. I have no idea what happened, but there was nothing I could have done to save them. I think you're right, Mandy, I replied. It was too late to save them. Leave the aquarium, I'll wash it out and sanitize it when I get back tomorrow. There was a very muted atmosphere in our house that Saturday. It was only a brief stopover for me because I was returning early in the morning, and on Sunday I was due to travel to Yorkshire again. I had a list of things to do, including sorting out a pile of papers. Mandy had gone shopping and cooked dinner to keep me busy, and we spent a quiet evening in front of the Google box with a glass or two of wine, watching celebrity chatter on the TV. Neither of us was in the mood for intimacy, probably because we were both too exhausted physically and emotionally for different reasons. To my surprise, I managed to get a good night's sleep for the first time in days. When I woke up, the shock in my system seemed to have eased, and my mind had adjusted to the new reality. Feelings of alienation, insecurity, and despair were receding, replaced by a grim determination to keep working and make the most of a bad job. I still felt sadness and emptiness inside me, but I knew I was far from melancholy and controlled my emotions, focusing on the short-term results I could well achieve. After lunch, I packed up the car, kissed my wife goodbye, and left for Yorkshire. Mandy must have been shocked to the core when she was handed the divorce papers a couple of days later. No one had warned her about it, and I suppose she thought she was just signing some business papers. Of course, I knew when it was going to happen and made sure my cell phone was turned off that day. I'd like to think that I wasn't being petty or cruel because I was so busy at work, but I have to admit that I liked the idea of being unconnected for those few hours. Back in my room after work, I turned my phone back on, read the messages, and listened to the voicemail. The gist of it was that she was frustrated, puzzled, and angry. Without delay, I called her back. "What the hell is going on, Terry?" she asked, getting straight to the point. "That's exactly the question I've been asking myself, Mandy," I replied. "But that was a week or so ago." "I don't understand what you're up to, but I'd like you to stop," she said. "This is getting beyond a joke. It's like you're reading my script, Mandy." "What do you mean?" she asked. "Well, Mandy, at some point I wondered what you were up to," I told her. "Unfortunately, it's too late to stop it now, and it definitely wasn't just a joke." "What are you talking about, Terry?" "The Ainsley House Hotel and the Bottoms Up Club." There was a pause, followed by a long sigh. "I'm sorry, Terry," she said. "I really don't know what to say. I thought you'd never find out, and what you don't know can't hurt you." "Mandy, I have found out. I know about it, and it hurts. Terry, we need to talk about it, but it's not something we can do over the phone." "Are you coming home on Friday?" she asked. "I'm not sure talking will help," I told her. "I'll be there on Saturday, Mandy, but I need to be back in Yorkshire by Sunday evening." Mandy looked very worried when I got back on Saturday afternoon. I didn't bother unpacking because I wasn't sure how things would work out. I had planned to stay overnight in one of the guest bedrooms, but wanted to be able to go somewhere else in case of difficulties. Faced with the destruction of a home, a dwelling, family, or friends, the English usually put the kettle on and make tea. Soon, Mandy had us seated in the living room with a cup of tea, and I waited patiently for her to begin her story. "First of all, I have to lay my cards on the table and say that this whole mess is my fault, Terry." I didn't answer anything. The fact is, I gave in to temptation. I found out about the Bottoms Up Club almost by accident, and then I couldn't stop thinking about it. When I came the first time, you weren't home. I was incredibly nervous, to the point where I put on a masquerade mask because I thought if I could hide my face, people wouldn't see me. I thought I could just be an observer, watching other people perform and putting on a show for everyone else. I waited for her to continue. "At first, it was exactly how I envisioned it," she said. "But then a lot of people started coming up to me. I didn't immediately let myself be talked into active participation. But then I realized that these people are some of the most sincere, honest, and safe people I've ever met. And that's another reason I kept doing it." She looked at me hopefully and expectantly. "I agree, Mandy," I replied. "Having fun with other people can be fun." She smiled encouragingly at me. "As far as I'm concerned," I continued, "if you don't have an obligation to someone else, you can do whatever you want, as long as it's with consenting adults." I leaned back in my chair, sipping my tea, watching her smile disappear quickly and waiting for her reaction. As far as I could tell, Mandy was behaving as I expected. She had a plan, and she was going to carry it out. She acknowledged that there had been a mistake in her plan for which she was responsible, but there was no sign of apology, no regret for the damage done, and no indication that the plan would be reversed. I knew her well enough to realize that she would be like a dog getting a bone. "What I've done with other people from time to time has had no effect on my feelings for you, Terry," she said. "I love you very much, and our life together is wonderful. I just hope you can realize that having fun with other people in a safe environment from time to time is not a threat to what we have. If you're not interested, you can just ignore it. If you're not there, you don't see anything." "I think you're wrong, Mandy," I replied. "In any case, I'm afraid it's too late for me not to see anything." "What do you mean?" she asked. "I know you found out about the payments to the hotel and the club. Do you mean you saw me there?" I looked her in the eye. "If I remember correctly, around 8 o'clock on Monday night a couple weeks ago, you were entertained by two young guys." "Oh my God," she sighed. "I'm so sorry about that. Seeing me there must have come as a terrible shock to you, but believe me when I tell you that I don't love anyone else and wouldn't want to love anyone else. Looking back, I realized that I should have talked to you, but I wasn't sure I could tell you about it." "Well, you were right about that, Mandy," I said. "I wouldn't have been happy if you had told me what you were doing. Maybe it was even more exciting for you because you couldn't tell me about it. I know you must be hurt and offended, and I can understand your point of view, Terry. I agree that I may have made an error in judgment, but filing for divorce is an extreme reaction, don't you think?" "I don't think it's an extreme reaction under the circumstances," I replied. "You chose to betray me by giving yourself to other people. In my opinion, that's unacceptable, which is why I want a divorce." Mandy's shoulders slumped and she sighed submissively. "Can we at least give some thought to what this will mean for all concerned before going down this path? I just don't think we should give up on the status quo without thinking about the consequences." "I'm already thinking about the consequences," I replied. "We can take time to think about it, Mandy, but I'm not likely to change my mind." Next chapter. I left Mandy alone with her thoughts and went to the Fox and Hounds for a beer myself. I like pubs, but I've never felt completely comfortable at Fox and Hounds. Despite all the years we lived in the neighborhood, I wasn't going to miss it much. The clientele consisted mostly of pretentious middle-aged jerks, and if I had a choice, a pint of Yorkshire ale would beat a watery southern beer any day of the week. Sipping the flat, warm, and relatively flavorless home brew, I contemplated my next steps. By the time I got back to the driveway, Mandy had already started getting ready for dinner, so I went upstairs, dropped my bag off in the guest bedroom, and picked up a couple things I needed from the master bedroom. Our conversation over dinner mostly centered around what our daughters were doing. Lucy had obviously heeded Mandy's advice and was playing the field, finding a replacement for her ex-boyfriend who was now dating Lucy's best friend, much to Lucy's annoyance. I asked Mandy what a BFF was, and she explained that it stood for best friend forever. It seemed unlikely to me that the girl in question would have that status for a long time. I had always considered Mandy my best friend. She knew that my attitude towards her had become relatively cold, but I don't think she realized how much things had changed, perhaps because I wasn't rude or impolite. She seemed to be under the impression that our conversation after lunch had led to some sort of ceasefire agreement. I wasn't going to dissuade her of that just yet. Sunday morning, I got up early, made myself some toast and coffee, packed my bags, jumped in the wee bug, and set off for Yorkshire. I thoroughly checked and cleared the car of everything that belonged to Mandy, including some business folders I found lying on the back seat. I had already passed Watford when my cell phone rang. "Where are you?" Mandy asked. "Did you happen to take Weebug to the garage?" "No," I answered. "I've picked up Weebug and I'm on my way back to Yorkshire." "I don't understand. You mean you've already left? Why did you take Weebug away and why didn't you say goodbye to him?" "I decided to take Weebug away and you were still asleep." There was a pause while she comprehended the information she had received. "I don't understand," she said at last. "What am I supposed to do without Weebug?" "You can use the other car, the one I usually drive." "I still don't understand why you took my car, but I know you're not yourself right now, so I'll let you go this time. I'll make do with another car for a few days. Just drive carefully and make sure you don't damage the Weebug." By the next afternoon, I was the proud owner of a little red Mazda MX-5 convertible I spotted in the parking lot of a Yorkshire dealership. I part-exchanged the Weebug minus the personalized registration plates. All the DVLA paperwork was done, and I put the personalized registration number up for sale on several websites. Mandy was very annoyed when she phoned me that week to find out that I had no plans to return from Yorkshire. But how am I going to get my car back? She asked. She asked. She asked. You don't, I told her. I sold it. What do you mean you sold it? She shouted. It was my car. Actually, Mandy, technically it wasn't, I replied. I bought it, and my name was on the DVLA registration papers. But that's not fair, Terry. Maybe it is, I replied. I suppose you could argue that I gave it to you as a gift and it wasn't fair of me to take it away from you. But that's not much different from what you did to me. Come on, Terry, she said. It's not the same thing at all. You're just being petty. But I understand what you're trying to get across to me. If you'd stop this nonsense and just come home, we could talk things over reasonably, work things out, and move on with our lives. Leave that to me, Mandy, I said, and I'll come back to you. For the whole of the next week, Mandy called me every day, asking me to come back to Surrey to talk to me and try to sort things out. The conversation was always the same until she found out that I had sold my stake in the ABC. How could you make that decision alone? She pestered me. Why didn't you talk to me about your thoughts? I'm the second shareholder in our company, so you should ask me before you just go ahead and do something crazy. Those are reasonable questions, I replied calmly. I know you're ABC's second shareholder and I realize that my actions will seriously affect you. Believe me, Mandy, I completely understand that you are angry and upset that I made the decision unilaterally without consulting you. I am quite sure you would not have approved of my intentions, but I did not need to ask you about the sale of ABC shares. I know how you feel because I felt the same way when I found out about your decision to have fun with other people. I'm sorry you're upset, but whatever your feelings are, the decision can't be reversed. You'll just have to accept what happened and adjust to whatever changes come as a result. You bastard, Terry, she growled. The next time she called a few days later, she was screaming and yelling at me, blazing with rage. So much so that it was hard to understand exactly what she was saying. When we started the company, we each had the same number of shares. What she didn't realize was that I had inherited my father's shares, and that increased my stake to 51%. It came as a nasty surprise to her when ABC's new majority owners froze the company's bank accounts and sent her an invitation to an extraordinary general meeting to consider proposals to replace the board and complete the takeover. Mandy angrily informed me that she now had no access to ABC's cash reserves. Don't you understand, Terry? ABC had over $200,000 in the bank. Because of what you have done, we can no longer manage those funds. I don't know what to do. Now we won't be able to get that money for retirement. I'm sorry you have such bad news, I managed to say when she paused. But at least you still have a job. I mean, you probably still have a job. A sharp sigh sounded. Oh my God, she gasped, realizing what I'd said. There was silence for a moment, then I heard the unmistakable sounds of mournful sobs. And then, she was gone. I think Mandy eventually guessed that the deal I'd made with Jim Savage took ABC's finances and other resources into account. What she didn't know was that in exchange for 51% of the stock, I received double the average annual turnover for the last 5 fiscal years, plus the equivalent of cash reserves. The other part of the deal was that Jim was offering to keep Mandy as a principal consultant for at least 2 more years with a set annual salary and additional performance-based payments. Jim wasn't the kind of person who liked to chat. He knew that keeping her as the face of ABC would be good business. Next chapter. During the divorce proceedings, our house was sold. Buying and selling houses in England is a tricky business. Offers often depend on other chain deals, where a bidder relies on someone else buying their property before they can buy yours. Not only that, the best offers can be outbid at the last minute by someone offering more money after the official closing date. That's exactly what happened with our house. The best offer at the closing date was contingent on other deals in the chain that were eventually going to bring us money. However, the day after the closing date, the real estate agent received a slightly better offer without the chain and other encumbrances. I was very pleased when we decided to accept this unconditional offer, and I think Mandy was relieved when the deal was finalized. By then, she had fully accepted that we were going our separate ways. The deed transferring ownership of the house stated that the new owners were Max Payne Associates. I made sure that the identity of the person behind Max Payne Associates was not revealed. I considered it a good investment. The house was in a great location and could easily be rented out to create an additional source of income for a change management consultant living and working in Yorkshire. I hadn't spoken to Mandy for quite some time, but she called me recently to ask if I had come across her wedding dress. Our daughter Linda and her boyfriend are on the cusp of getting married, and it seems Mandy was keen for Linda to wear her wedding dress on the big day. Mandy thought that perhaps it had been mistakenly packed and put with my things when we parted. "I'm sorry, Mandy," I said. "I have no idea where your wedding dress might be." I always try to tell the truth. I have no idea where the dress might be now because I took it away and sold it to a nice lady in Yorkshire who has an almost new store. There is no way I would have let my wife keep that wedding dress. Apart from breaking her vows, I was sure my daughters would not be able to wear it if or when I walked any of them down the aisle. Lucy called me a few days later. "Mommy's going crazy, Daddy," she exclaimed in drama queen mode. "She just found out that the diamond and eternity ring you gave her a few years ago is cheap costume jewelry. It's more or less worthless." "Oh dear, what a pity," I replied. She must have thought it very valuable and must have been very disappointed and unhappy. I guess she never would have known the truth if she hadn't checked him out. That's the way it is sometimes in life. People place a certain value on things and then are terribly disappointed when the value of the thing turns out to be much less than they thought. Sure enough, the original ring is safely tucked away in a safe in my bank. Who knows? It might come in handy if I find someone special. The end. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for the next videos.